Hey guys, Zach here with Minimal Escapes, and today I wanted to share with you guys some tips and tricks that I use while breeding my guppies, and I hope these tricks will help you breed guppies and also be able to breed them a lot. So let's get right into it. Alright, so the first thing that I want to talk about is more of a general thing than specific to guppies. So the first thing is you want to make sure that your tank is cycled before you even get the fish. So set it up like a month before if you're starting from nothing. This tank behind me, I had used some media that I already had before, as well as I had a filter in here to seed it with some beneficial bacteria. That's really what you want. So completing that cycle, it's the nitrogen cycle that you're trying to complete with the bacteria, is really important to, it's just going to lower the maintenance on the tank and keep the fish happier, keep the plants happier, keep everything happier. So that's really the first thing that you want to kind of look for before you even get the fish and you're thinking about it. Get a tank up, get it running, and get it cycled. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is going to be the water parameters for guppies. I'm just going to go over temperature and pH because guppies are super hardy, so those more fine, I would call them more advanced, like GH and KH, don't need to be as attended to with guppies since they are so hardy. So starting off with pH, they're really good in most pHs, honestly. Your tap water is going to be absolutely fine unless you have horrendous tap water, right? Your water should be around a 7. If you're a little more basic or a little more acidic, not a big deal. They're gonna be fine. Again, they're super hardy. And for temperature, I would recommend keeping your tanks at around 75 at the lowest. You know, guppies can survive at 70 and all the way up to like 84, I would say, is that range. But again, I recommend keeping your tanks at 75 as a minimum. But I found the most success with guppies as far as breeding goes with keeping it around 80, and then whenever I fill up my tanks, I'll have the water slightly warmer at maybe 84. So if I do a water change, I put the water in, that's 84, and that kind of warms it up, and I find that that gets them more into a breeding mood, but it may just be the water change, and it might be the temperature rise. So that's one thing that you can try if you're struggling with starting out with breeding guppies. So the next thing that I want to talk about is just the baby side. What happens when you actually get baby guppies? I know I just went over temperature and pH, and I didn't really share anything too specific about breeding them, but you don't need that if you're going to start breeding guppies, right? They're live bearers, so you don't have to do anything with the eggs or fertilizing the eggs or anything like that. Live bearers, super easy. The female is just going to shoot out a bunch of babies. So now, what happens when you have that? Well, there's a couple of different options you can go. The first, as you can see here, is setting up a tank like this that's smaller, that you're going to be able to keep a better track of the young in. I would only recommend doing this if you want to have as many babies as possible, because you're going to be keeping a much closer eye on them, and this is going to give you a better chance of growing them up and getting them to adulthood so that the parents don't eat them in their own tank. The next option would be to get one of those, they're like mesh cages that'll sit on the back of a tank. You can do this if you don't have space for another tank and you want to keep the young alive. I've used it before and it works quite well. And it lets you separate the young from the adults, and then you can grow them enough so that they can go back in with the adults. And I would say that that works pretty well. And then the third option is always just leaving the youngin with the adults and hoping that they survive. I wouldn't recommend this one too much. It just doesn't work out most of the time. Guppies are always hungry, so they're always looking for a snack, and usually the young are the easy snack. If you do decide to keep them in the tank with the adults, my recommendation is going for a very, very heavily planted tank. Something with lots of plants, lots of moss, lots of hardscape, everything. This is just going to give the babies the best chance of survival, with tons of nooks and crannies and line of sight breaks. it's just going to give them a higher chance and hiding spaces to get away from the adult. So yeah, those are really the 3 options you have once you have your babies. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is just how to sex your guppies. So when you're at the store, it's really easy. They have them already separated out to male and female. But when you start breeding them, you're going to find that you're just going to get a whole bunch of both. And it's kind of hard to tell when they're really small like they are in this tank, but as they get a little bit bigger, there's definitely some distinguishing features. So the females are usually a bit fatter. They're generally larger too than the males. And the males are much more skinny. They're much more streamlined. The females also have a big black dot at the end of their stomach. And that's kind of a giveaway usually, along with the shape. But that's really, as well as coloration, males are generally brighter than females, but that's really what I use, is the black dot. That's how I kind of tell which one's male and which one's female. I'll put something up on screen right now that shows the differences, but that's really all I use, and I've found that to be very reliable, but I just need to wait a little bit. Just wait a little bit until they're bigger, and then you'll be able to tell. Usually I do it like a couple weeks after I separate them out, so sometimes I'll miss 1 or 2, not a big deal. I'll just move it over once I've realized. Right, and the last thing that I want to talk to you guys about is just what to do now that you've got like an army of guppies going, right? If you're breeding them, you can go from having like 5 guppies to having 80 in no time flat, right? Just depending on your amount of females. So I would say there's really 3 options that you've got when you're kind of moving fish around. And the first option, if it's available to you, is of course to set up another tank like this. Obviously this isn't going to work for adults, but if you have a 20-gallon tank just lying around that's empty, you could always do that and put some fish in there, but even still that might not be enough, so that's when I'd move on to something like the second option that I'll say, which is going to be bringing them back to a fish store. Most fish stores are more than happy to take back fish, right? So that's always available if you need. And the last option that I would say is going to a website like Facebook Marketplace or eBay, and you can try to sell them. This option is much better if you kind of set it up beforehand, right? It's going to take a lot longer to kind of distribute the fish or sell them than something like just going and dropping them off at the fish store, right? But those are 3 options. Kind of get your thoughts going about what to do with your guppy army. So hopefully this video was able to give you guys some insight into what it's like to breed guppies and how to breed guppies, and also maybe give you some ideas of what to do after you've bred your guppies, right? But that's everything for this video. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. If you have, please consider subscribing. Peace.